Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Home Tech Podcast. Jason Griffin here. Happy, as always, to have you with us, and I am joined once again by my partner, Seth Johnson. Seth, how's it going?
Good, man. You can hear me this week.
Yes, I can. Welcome back. I know you had some issues with your computer that prevented you from joining us last week. We had Chris Gamble on from Live Install, and I got to just have a conversation with him myself. How's your computer situation shaking out?
Well, I had a nice little Mac Air 11-inch computer for about 4 years, and it decided Monday or Tuesday of last week to just not turn on. And that led to me scrambling to realize and find the holes in my backup strategies, which I've got a number of them now.
Funny how a computer crash will do that.
Yeah. Well, it did work out, but being down for a full day put me really behind on work, put me really behind on a bunch of other stuff that I was trying to get done, and I wasn't able to sit down and record with you last week. But I've got a temporary Mac Mini that I am renting from Apple until the 14-day return policy goes on November 1st, and I'm hoping...
Timed that one, huh?
Yep, I'm hoping I can get a new computer tomorrow. As we sit down, there's a big Apple event where they announce the new MacBook Pro. Well, hopefully they'll announce new everything, because their computer line is such a kludge. Like, this stuff hasn't been updated in 3 years. Ridiculous, but
right.
Hopefully we'll get new computers.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this show, it'll obviously be at least the 28th, and the Apple event is on the 27th. So like you said, that'll be tomorrow as we're sitting here recording this. Is that timing going to work out? I mean, you've got rented computer that needs to be returned. Do you think that computer, the new MacBook Pro, everyone's talking about it? I don't doubt that it's going to come out, but I forget how these things work. Do you think they'll be shipping right away?
Well, I don't like this Mac Mini. It's very slow, and I think it's slow because I didn't get the SSD drive. I've still got the spinning disk in there, and I'm not happy with it. So I'm just going to bring it back anyway and do a full backup, full clone of the drive. And then when I get there, if I can't get a new computer, I'll rent another one for 14 days until I can get a real one.
Hey, well, it's not like you just told anyone about your plan, but...
well, if anybody from Apple's listening, pay no mind.
Right. Yeah, I've got a Mac Mini here at home, and I've got the spinning hard drive in mine, and it's okay. I've got a SSD in my laptop that I use, and it's definitely significantly better. But yeah, I find the spinning one, once it kind of boots up and gets going, it's not too bad, but definitely that reboot and boot up process is pretty rough. But anyways, let's get in. We've got a lot to cover here. Another great show. David Weinstein from Lutron joined us, and listeners to our show may recall, actually it was just about a year ago exactly we had David on, and didn't really plan it that way, but that's how it worked out. And he joined us again, talked about a lot of interesting stuff with him. One of the main topics we touched on is sort of this emerging builder market for home technology. We're seeing a lot of big kind of production builders here in the States, in particular, companies like KB Homes and Lennar really start to show more interest in the smart home. And so we talked about Lutron and their role in that. We're going to touch a little bit on that in the news as well. So we do have some news to cover. Be sure you stay tuned for our interview with David. Before we jump into the news, just want to send another quick thank you to everyone out there who's become a patron of the show. If you're not familiar with what that means, you can head over to HomeTech.fm/support. We've had a number of people do that and sign up. And in short, it's a way that you can financially support our efforts here and show some love to the Home Tech Podcast for as little as $1 a month. Really appreciate everybody who's done that. If you're a fan of the show, if you find it entertaining or educational, would highly encourage you to take a minute and go check that out. Once again, that URL is HomeTech.fm/support.
Absolutely. I just want to echo thanks as well. If anybody has gone, and we've had a couple over the last couple of weeks, join up and sign up to be patrons, and we definitely appreciate that. Keeps the lights running. Might help go to fund a new computer here shortly.
You got it. Well, let's dive in. We got a number of news stories here we want to cover, and like I alluded to, one of the first topics we're going to touch on is initiative on the part of Apple to really get aggressive with some of these production builders. So we've seen some stories break this week about Apple teaming up with companies like Lennar, Brookfield Residential was mentioned, KB Home, and they're basically going in and using model homes to put in HomeKit equipment and demonstrate this to potential buyers, with obviously the hope of planting that seed and getting people, more immersed into the Apple ecosystem. One of the articles I read said they had about $30,000 worth of HomeKit gear. I was kind of scratching my head and trying to figure out that's a lot of HomeKit gear. This stuff is typically $200 to $300. So I suspect maybe some of that was speakers in the ceiling, or who knows what was included in that number. But
TVs.
In any event, yeah, exactly. In any event, though, I think it is interesting to see Apple taking a proactive role in this.
Yeah, definitely. This is really cool. I'm excited to start seeing this, because we knew that the technology would make it into the home eventually, and one of the big guards and vanguards of that it has been builders. I mean, they've been very difficult to team up with and bring in technology for some good reasons and for some bad reasons. Like from my perspective, I'd like to see this technology in every single home. But from a builder who has to warranty and has to, keep up, listen to the complaints of somebody who's not happy with a technology integrator who isn't really holding up their end of the deal, I could totally see that, why they weren't enthusiastic about including technology in homes. So I'm glad to see this. I'm glad to see we're finally getting up that hill into a wide adoption and, breaking through some of the old business models and getting into the builder homes is one way of doing it.
Yep, definitely. And I think also one of the things that struck me about it is that it does, in my mind, demonstrate a long-term a commitment by Apple to the smart home and a belief that this market is for real, because it's not a short play for them. HomeKit is not about selling hardware. They're not in it for that. And so this is definitely a long play for them to try to get people more immersed into the iOS ecosystem, and clearly there's self-interest there, but it's not like they're going to see, a really quick return on it directly. It's more of a long play for them, and I thought that was interesting. There was another article, semi-related, but on a different note, in CE Pro this week that Julie put up about, will builders basically be subsidizing this sort of technology in exchange for the data that they can gather. And so this stemmed off of a speech that a gentleman by the name of Tim Costello, who's runs a builder marketing business called BDX, gave a speech at the ASEAN Unlimited conference out in Vegas. And interesting topic. We'll include a link in the show notes. People can go check that out. In short, the argument that he's making is that builders may have a vested interest in subsidizing some of this connected technology. And he's talking less about entertainment devices, but more about things like deep sensor networks in the home, for applications like aging in place or monitoring appliances that may need regular maintenance or parts and things like that. And I think there's a lot of interesting things you can think about in terms of market possibilities when it comes to that sort of data being generated out of a home. And so I thought it was a really interesting kind of way to think about it, and would encourage people to go check that out.
Yeah. Interesting story. Interesting thought that the data that is generated by some of these devices could be sold off and be another profit center for someone. It's kind of like, I don't know, maybe they'll learn and figure out when we're interested in buying a new home and, be there the next morning knocking on the door.
You never know. Big brother, right? Well, anyways, let's move on. Speaking about things being sold, big story this week came out that we saw a potential acquisition of Time Warner by AT&T. And this is what's called an agreement in principle. So right now it's still early phases. It's going to be subject to some regulatory approval, of course. But in short, AT&T is looking to acquire Time Warner for $85 billion. No official comment from either company right now, so we haven't heard a whole lot. But this would be a very big deal. It would put networks like HBO, CNN, TNT, a lot of content under AT&T's umbrella. This is on the heels as well, we should mention, of AT&T's recent purchase of DirecTV for $48 billion. So AT&T really getting aggressive about these kind of acquisitions and going out there and seeing what they can do in that space. And so a lot of implications here. Definitely an interesting story.
Yeah, I find it interesting that there once was only one company, AT&T, and they were broken up into many different companies for monopoly reasons. and now they're just kind of like healing back and and becoming one giant company again. Time Warner is an interesting purchase because this isn't Time Warner Cable. This is like a content company, right? So like you're saying, HBO, CNN, TNT, those channels and content providers and content makers would go under AT&T, which is weird to think about. I mean, but as we move forward, companies like DirecTV and AT&T does have AT&T Uverse out there for cable providing. Like they're providing the pipes into the house. They could also be providing the content, which is kind of strange to think about.
Right. And that is one of the arguments. I was reading about this, and obviously anytime there's a huge merger or acquisition like this, one of the natural things that people go to, as well as this becoming a monopoly and will this deal get approved? And one of the points that was being made is that this really the argument can be made that this is more of a vertical integration. This is not to direct competitors, one buying the other to eliminate competition. This is more of what they were calling a vertical integration. So it's a telecom distribution company purchasing what is in essence a content company. Warner Brothers TV studios, Warner Brothers Pictures, those would both be part of this deal. Those are both owned by Time Warner. So really it's by and large seems to be about content. AT&T really seems to be looking at content as a way to differentiate their mobile services moving forward. And so I think in that sense, there could actually be some upside to consumers on this. And one of the examples of that's not directly related, but I shouldn't say that. Maybe not necessarily directly related, but surely there are some ties there, is the announcement also this week of DirecTV Now, which is DirecTV's forthcoming streaming service, which is going to go for $35 a month. We first heard about this service a while back, but now we know what the pricing is going to be, and they're also saying that it's going to launch with over 100 channels. We don't know exactly what those channels are, but really this all kind of ties together into that idea of new ways of distributing content out there over networks.
Right. Yeah. And this is exciting for cable cutters. $35 a month, 100 channels. We just don't know which channels they are. I did run across a story that said CBS wasn't on board, which they've been kind of tough to bring to the table when it comes to integrating their product and their content with these third-party aggregation services like DirecTV Now. Sling, I guess TV comes to mind, but I'm not sure if they may be on there. I'm not sure. Apple, remember when reportedly Apple was running after all of these content providers to make an Apple TV? CBS was one of the ones that said, no, we're not going to deal with Apple. So pretty interested to see where this goes. It seems like a pretty good deal, but I don't know if it's going to be 3 channels I want and
97 you don't.
Yeah, it's not really good value at that point. So we'll see what it looks like.
Yep. Well, and incidentally, you mentioned CBS, and there was a story not long ago, I think just the week prior, that CBS is joining YouTube's forthcoming streaming TV service, which is interesting. CBS has traditionally seemed to have been a holdout to services like this, and so who knows? All these negotiations are surely handled independently, and it's going to come down to CBS getting the sort of terms that they want. So sounds like CBS won't be included in this. Will be interesting to see what channels are specifically. It does, the article of course mentions that this DirecTV Now service will be available on various smartphones, tablets, set-top boxes, smart TVs. Obviously the smartphone's pretty self-explanatory. That's surely going to be iOS and Android, as well as the tablets. I think it'll be interesting to see what set-top boxes this becomes available on, as well as what sort of TVs are going to come out with this app built right into it.
Yep. And then what the quality is going to be. Is this going to be 1080p? Is it going to be 4K? Because as it turns out, we dealers are having problems distributing 4K around the house.
No.
Yeah.
There's no problems.
There may be a problem around a 4-letter word, HDMI.
No.
So, interesting article in CE Pro, The Ugly Truth About Ultra HD and What Dealers Need to Do About It. Evidently, 4K HDR is starting to exceed the limits of what HDMI can actually do. And there are challenges with equipment capabilities. We've talked in the past about how you have to have a full chain of 4K compatible gear. It all has to be the same 4K type, even where the Blu-ray player has to be 4K, the receiver has to be 4K, the TV has to be 4K. If anything is not 4K, or even turns out not on the right firmware, you don't get 4K. You get either a downgraded signal or something that's not true 4K. They're also having problems with longer HDMI cables on the systems, which, when we're doing video distribution, that's a we're not running HDMI cables. We're running other equipment, but sometimes you will need an HDMI cable to go to a projector, for instance, and that typically tends to be a longer HDMI. And some of the equipment is not even able to handle what they're calling, what is 444. I think most of the time you get 420, if I'm not correct.
Yep.
444 needs 18 gigabytes per second, and 420 is under 10, I think. They're saying that is going to be a problem moving forward, even on systems that aren't HD base T capable or need balance or anything like that. They're saying the Ultra Blu-ray discs from Samsung and Philips are outputting at 13.5 gigabits per second. Once they hit the receiver, a switcher, they get squeezed down to 9 gigabytes per second, and the HDR is actually gone. That's a problem. That's a big problem. If we're selling 4K and not actually delivering on it, what are we going to do?
Yeah, it's a lot of numbers and alphabet soup there, and it gets nuanced. But at the end of the day, you're right. It's a challenge, and it's something that we've talked about quite a bit on the show. And there's always people having this conversation and trying to figure out how we handle it. I got a kick out of this. Was reading the article, and one of the solutions mentioned is conduit.
Yay!
And I just thought that was so funny, because here we are talking about all this crazy high technology stuff, and at the end of the day, what's still one of the best solutions? Well, just a plain old-fashioned conduit, and it's hard to argue with that.
Yep, absolutely. Another couple of things they brought up were fiber, which you probably need to pull inside of conduit to keep it protected and away from drywall saws, and then network solutions. And according to one of the people quoted in the article, the appetite for 4K and HDR inside of the commercial realm has always been there for the past couple of years. And we're seeing that technology kind of filtered down into the residential space. But the thing is, that's super expensive to do. Like it's not something that you're going to see done in most residential homes. And then I think one that the article missed was the one that I keep hitting on, and I think we've talked about a number of times on the show, is just the app on the TV. We've talked about DirecTV Now and the other services that are out there. What stops them from delivering 4K content straight to the TV and displaying it right on their app? That's coming, and it'll come faster than we can figure out what to do with our equipment. Soon we'll just have screens that will display 4K natively, and you don't have to worry about running conduit or fiber or anything like that. Just hook up to a network, and you're good to go.
Right. Well, and that signal, even if you are doing what you describe, where you're just basically mounting the TV on the wall and hooking it up to a network, I mean, that network signal's still got to get there somehow, and whether that's over fiber or obviously more likely copper or even Wi-Fi. One thing I will admit to not having a great understanding of is what the data requirements are in that application. Obviously, if you've got 4K HDR content, if it's on the network, presumably it's going to be under what we're talking about when you cite that number, 18 gigabits per second. That's to send the audio and video signal. If this is IP packets on the network, what does that translate to? I actually don't have a good understanding of that, but presumably, my gut tells me that's more where we're going to start to move away from this whole idea of video distribution, and it's just going to turn into, apps that live natively on the TV or on the display itself. And so I think that is definitely a conversation that is going to play into this in a major way.
Yeah, and if you think about it, there's really not much of a difference between. I mean, with the HDR, that's what we're really going for, right? If they can compress the video signal down send it over a smaller pipe and uncompress it right at the screen. Like you were saying, I don't know what the bandwidth requirements on that are either, but it seems like we'd be able to do that faster than we'll be able to develop fiber technologies, to carry a full 18 gigabits per second to the TV for no reason. And I guess my next thing is, what content is going to be available that this is actually going to be, needed for. One of the gentlemen in the article says that sports is going to be a big one, but I heard that argument before. Sports in 3D were going to be, the only reason to walk around with your stupid 3D glasses on in a sports bar to watch these 3D TVs, and that fell flat on its face. So I don't know. I mean, maybe there's a compelling reason there for 4K HDR or even 8K HDR and 120 hertz demos, 120 hertz sports broadcasts, but I just don't really see that being that compelling that we're going to need to have a full infrastructure inside of a house to take care of it. I mean, if anything has been said about video for the last decade is that everybody has kind of gone down market into a price point that is comfortable for people to buy. And if you can get 4K content on a $500 TV, you can. It happens. I have 2 of them in my house now. Mm-hmm. That's going to be the least path of resistance to getting the content displayed on the TV. Is just go right to the TV. Right. And it can be done that way easily.
Yep, definitely. Well, let's move on. We've got one more broad story we want to cover here and a bunch of little subheadings under this one. But before we get into our interview with David Weinstein of Lutron, we want to go back and revisit a topic that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. And it has to do with internet security and this recent spell of DDoS attacks, distributed denial of service attacks that we've seen. Seth, I know you've got a bunch of thoughts on this, and I'm going to let you kind of jump in here and share what you're thinking this week.
Well, this was from last week. So on Friday, as I'm uploading the podcast to our CDN, I'm seeing all these things on Twitter about things not working correctly, the internet's down, what's going on. Well, evidently there was a massive denial of service attack on a company called DYN, who basically serves as the internet's phone book, if you will. When you type in google.com, the computers all in the back end say, well, computers only understand numbers. They have to go look up what google.com actually means in computer languages, and it returns the numbers back to your computer. And for any given website that you go to, there's could be 30 or 40 of those requests being made. And they all have to look up that name and then return some numbers back to your computer. Well, whoever this was behind this attack, they're probably not sure who it is yet. They decided to attack the servers that were running that phone book, the DNS servers. Basically took down Twitter, Netflix, BBC's website, Spotify, and Reddit for most of the morning, I want to say, before I noticed things starting settling back out, and the company DYN was able to get a handle on it. This isn't a problem with DYN. This is a problem with internet-connected devices attacking a single or multiple servers that they owned. It's not anything that they could have stopped, because when they have all these devices starting, just basically saying, hey, what's the phone number for this website? Well, they get slow. They get slower. And then, Jason, what happens when you go to Twitter yourself and you're totally legitimate and you type in twitter.com and you hit enter and it doesn't load? It just kind of like sits there. What's your first reaction?
Refresh.
Yeah, refresh. Yep. Well, guess what? Now you just requested it again from the same server. So they get hit not only from the illegitimate traffic from this denial of service, they're getting hit doubly from the people who are actually trying to get to the information. Yeah, and so that's what you saw happen. Yep, that's what you saw happen on Friday. They started doing some more digging into this over the weekend, and the initial guy who was attacked, Krebs on Security, their website was attacked last month or so, and they suspected it was coming from these internet. Oh God, everybody's calling them Internet of Things. The IoT devices are attacking us all. And Jason, I don't know about you, but when I hear IoT, what do you think about?
I think about you throwing up in your mouth a little bit.
Well, I think if you ask anybody on the street, they'd probably say, "Oh, light bulbs or cameras, dual cameras,
totally.
and that kind of thing."
Yeah.
It's not the problem is not with IoT. The problem is with cameras and systems that you and I probably have installed. I know I have. Have installed over the past decade, and these systems were not installed correctly. There's enough of them out there that they have made some malware that just basically continually scans the internet for an open port. And if these devices were set up with default usernames and password, it logs right in, does its little thing, and now it's a zombie computer. These can be DVRs, like the camera recorders themselves, which I know a lot of integrators out there just say, "Oh, okay, let's port forward this DVR straight out to the internet and give the client the IP address, and we're good to go. Wash hands, make money, next job." That's a problem. We can't do that anymore. Let me just go down the list of these. We talked about Dohua, which is IC real time, I believe, in our industry. But I know a lot of people buy Dohua direct or sideways and install it. Their cameras, both their cameras and DVRs, were majorly affected. There was an interesting. We'll put a link to the article. They're basically saying we can't really do anything about the products that we have out there. Some of them aren't even firmware upgradable. So they're going to offer some kind of trade-in program. I don't even know how that's going to work. And I don't even know how an integrator or an installer would go back, 10 years to every one of these that was installed and try and figure out how to do this trade-in. It just seems like a big mess, if you ask me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, virtually impossible, I would think.
And then let's see, ACTI cameras. If you've ever, I know I've seen a ton of those in commercial world. Anco cameras again. Axis, huge camera manufacturer. I used them quite a bit in the past. Mobotics, very, very large. They kind of got a really ugly IP camera that's really good. Packet 8 voice over IP phones. These are installed in businesses all the time, and now they're just zombie computers. Panasonic IP cameras, Samsung IP cameras, SMC routers. Comcast Commercial installs SMC routers here in Sarasota all the time. These little devices, if they weren't, they're the router. They're physically the router. If they had an open port, they're going to get scanned and made into a zombie computer. Toshiba IP cameras, Ubiquiti products, which would be the routers, Vivotech IP cameras, and Xerox printers. So a wide range of devices can be used for these attacks. And let's go ahead and add this on top of it. It's not necessarily the web login password that's actually the issue. These devices were using Telnet and SSH protocols, which is basically command line stuff. If you change the web admin login, it may not necessarily change the default password for the Telnet or SSH login. So no matter what you do, some of these devices just weren't made to sit out on the open internet at all. I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. Once they're brought into this botnet, there's no way that you would know if you had one of these in your house at all. So
it's interesting. The couple of different thoughts there. I think I agree with the point you're making. A lot of the stories I've seen are talking about this like it's an IoT problem, and unfortunately, that I think sheds a bad light on the smart home, because
I do too.
A lot of people in the consumer world are going to associate those two, and I think it's a stretch at best, as you pointed out. With that list of devices, a lot of those really have nothing to do with the IoT as most people think about it. And really, this is just a case more of broader, like network connected type of devices just not being secured properly or not having, basic practices like default passwords being changed. And that to me is the big takeaway. And I think, frankly, that's where, CDF put out a piece talking about the recent DDoS attack. Jeremy, who I work with for over at Residential Systems, had a piece on it. And I think there's a lot of interesting dialogue happening, and I think it's an important conversation that we all need to be talking about. But I don't hear a lot of conversation. A lot of it is focused on the threat that this sort of network connected technology can present. But if we look at the opportunity, wherever there's a threat, there's an opportunity. And I think the opportunity here is for home technology professionals to, first of all, get educated, put best practices in place, fail safes to make sure default passwords are all being changed, and then, position ourselves as experts on this. The important part being that we, of course, become experts first before we do that and actually follow through on it. But, position ourselves as experts and advocates for our clients to help them avoid being caught up in any of this sort of mess in the future.
Yep. It all comes down to education. And I got to say, some of the IoT devices that I would consider, consumer grade IoT devices that are out there now, Ring doorbell, Nest thermostat, these things have security that is by far and away better than anything that I just ran off on that list. They don't require you to port forward an open port to them to get video or, temperature data out to Google servers or Ring servers. These devices that are being made today are actually made with a lot more security in mind. It's when you start getting into the commercial devices like Axis and that kind of thing, and having them installed incorrectly is where you start running into these problems. There's a couple of links I'll put up in the show notes for scanning. Yeah, you can find out if your IP has been scanned and found to have an open security flaw. We'll put that in there. And then I also found a really cool app that will actually scan your cameras and find out if they are ones that are involved in this, if they have the default passwords built into them as well. I'll put those links. I think it's only Android, but I'll put those links into the show notes because it's always good to test. If you don't test, you don't know.
Right. Yeah. And so those were good finds. And so the show notes are at HomeTech.fm/134. And I think that's an important point that we kind of talked around, but didn't really hit on directly, is that this, you could have one of these devices in your home or multiple of these devices in your home that are part of this big botnet that's going out and doing these DDoS attacks, and you might not even know it. So it's probably worth a little bit of effort if you have any of those devices on that list to, dig in and check that out.
Absolutely. Should we jump into the interview here?
Yeah, let's do that. So again, we had David Weinstein on from Lutron and had a great conversation with him about a couple of topics, including the emerging builder market, and then just sort of a catch up of what's new with Lutron. Definitely a company that we spend a lot of time watching and I work with very closely here at our company in Denver, and a big fan of what they're doing in the market. So without any further delay, let's jump into our interview with David Weinstein. Hey, David, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Excellent, Jason. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I was getting ready for the show, and incidentally, we didn't really plan it this way, but it's been almost a year exactly since we had you on last. So we appreciate you coming back on.
Wow. Happy anniversary to all of us,
yeah.
I guess.
You got it. Well, we're going to dive in and we're going to talk about a number of different topics related to the home technology industry at large, and of course, touching on Lutron and your company's role in that and how you're fitting in and adapting to this evolving landscape. But in case we've got some listeners who may not be familiar with you and who you are and what you do, why don't you give us a quick personal introduction?
Sure. Well, I have been with Lutron for about 18 years now. I am currently Vice President of Residential Sales at Lutron, and I'm responsible for several of our residential channels, including the RIS or CEDIA channel, the lighting showroom channel, which is really a retail showroom / attachment fixture environment, and also the retail integrators channel, which for us is companies like B&O and Magnolia Design Centers and Magnolia Home Theaters. Prior to that, I was an independent rep for Lutron, actually about 23 years of my career up in New England. We handled the 6 states for Lutron and a number of other lighting and electric construction lines. And so all in, I've got 40 years of graying hair experience in this industry.
That'll happen. Yeah, I'm just over a decade in or more, and I got quite a bit of gray in my beard, so I'm catching up to you slowly but surely. So let's just jump in. We've got a ton that we want to cover, and one of the main things that we want to talk about is an emerging category. We've actually seen a number of stories this week about Apple, and they're getting active in working with builders and getting into that market, and that's something that obviously is very important in the home tech industry, and we want to talk about how Lutron fits in with this sort of emerging builder market where we're seeing large builders really adapt home technology and play a more active role in that. So just generally, give me your opinion on it. Are you really do you feel like you're seeing a perceptible shift by large builders to really embrace and offer smart home solutions?
Yeah, so one of my other related areas of focus here at Lutron is trying to lead our builder initiative, which traditionally was centered around the luxury and semi-custom world, because HomeWorks and Radio Raw 2, as an example, were very logical and relevant technologies to go in luxury homes. More recently, with the advent of Caseta, we're spending a lot of time developing business and relationships and defining the business case for builders around, Caseta wireless, battery-powered shade. So we're talking about what I'll call mid-market homes, which are driven primarily from the production builder market, which can range from very large national companies who build thousands of homes to regional and local companies that may build hundreds or even 10 or 20 homes. The answer is more and more that I am seeing Apple and Apple HomeKit, even though it hasn't been so well defined across the industry or with consumers, I do see builders, especially the large ones, kind of working in concert with Apple to begin to offer technology-centric homes with Apple HomeKit as really a broad-based control strategy. And for us, obviously, that's very good because HomeKit is compatible with Caseta wireless, as an example.
Very cool. That's something we've noticed, and we actually have a story queued up to talk about this week. Not sure if we're going to, but maybe we can talk about it here. Why do you think builders are kind of gathering around that HomeKit? Is it an initiative by Apple, or is it something that more brand recognition than anything?
Well, I think the last announcement, which I believe was the developers conference, Apple did talk about their alliance or their focus on three major production builders and in the country. And I think that related to this whole story, I believe builders are now recognizing the consumer value of the Apple name, and then HomeKit being this element of home automation that allows them to offer a diverse portfolio of innovations in the home, everything from lighting control to shading to temperature to locks to cameras, and all these HomeKit compatible devices. They're easily integrated in with that platform, and so I think for builders, it points to a path for the interoperability of multiple brands across the Apple platform with the confidence that it will work because it is Apple who is individually work with the individual companies to ensure the operation of that specific company's connected home device with HomeKit.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. It definitely is easy, I guess. It's one of those things that doesn't require so much setup from the end user. If they have all these different brand devices in their houses that will possibly talk to HomeKit, it's just there. I mean, the idea is it's just there when they are able to launch the app and set up the devices. How are you leveraging custom installers in that situation to kind of like handhold the customers? I know that mine wouldn't be able to probably do a full HomeKit deployment, but there are some out there that could probably handle it.
Yeah. So let me just say this: the concept and vision of the potentiality, in my opinion, is still in its infancy. But I can say with confidence that several builders are actually focusing on this. In the last month, I've been with 4 major builders, some very large national and some very local and one kind of regional. All want to align on the HomeKit platform, and in my case, working with Lutron, specifically Caseta. My answer on the players that will drive this business, I think it's early, but let me tell you what I'm seeing today. There are traditional residential interactive system integrators, Lutron, CEDIA type dealers, and some small percentage of those are taking an interest in this mid-market production home, very different business model. A few already had related businesses, whether they were around security and more baseline levels of automation, or they had relationships or have relationships or can make relationships with the local production builders. I will honestly say that today, most of the traditional integrators are not either interested or aligned in this new platform of business. There are a few that are experimenting, and there are other what I call hybrids that actually are doing it quite well. I really think the opportunity, we will learn about new kind of players, in-home service companies, maybe traditional companies that we've learned for years have been kind of talking about home control and automation, but really haven't done it yet. So I guess what I'm saying is it's a fast evolving business that today I see a small percentage of traditional integrators. Actually, frankly, traditional electrical contractors that are in homes doing wiring may be potentially well aligned to this very high volume business. And then, there's these other in-home service companies that are already in the home that have the kind of service-oriented scale to do large volumes of homes. I'll also tell you that based on today's world, that the luxury business is relatively strong across North America, and most of the traditional integrators are very busy in the luxury segment, and it's a very specialized business. Many that I talk to either don't want to move into this new market segment or are simply too busy and focused on taking care of their core business to potentially dilute their expertise in the mid-market business.
Yeah, I know from experience that it's a pretty tough market to dip your toe into. It's very fast paced. These builders are putting up 60 and 70 homes inside of a neighborhood in a matter of months. I mean, they go fast. As soon as they hit the ground with their model, they've already sold half the neighborhood out. I want to point to a case study I think was published in CE Pro where you were actually mentioned in it a couple of times about a case here in Florida with Arthur Ruttenberg Homes. It's ABRC. They're teaming up with the integrator AAMI, which I'm familiar with. It's a former employer of mine. And John's a really smart guy, and I was kind of in on those jobs that were around the Sarasota market area before I moved on. But they've got a lot going on. I can tell you it takes a pretty big company and a pretty solid process to see those types of projects closed out.
And John is an example of a few to maybe several companies that, great example of a hybrid integrator. Proficient in the high-end luxury business, very, very proficient and capable, and is involved in our core luxury business. In the semi-custom world, where Radio Raw 2 plays kind of a big role, but this whole new business because of the relationship with security and recurring revenue and driving simple, affordable, and reliable home control and automation to large and medium-sized builders that understand the value proposition of lifestyle enhancement and a way to basically sell that home with built-in innovation. And I always use the analogy of the car. Whether you buy a Hyundai or a BMW 7 Series, the technology suite today in new cars is virtually identical. It's not defined by the price of the car or the brand. The auto industry has figured out that people want and expect and will embrace technology, and once they have it, they won't live without it. So guys like John Toscano, good example, have the diversified portfolio, and it's a natural for a company like them to provide solutions, both the very niche high-end luxury, less homes per year, and very custom work and a very different business model in terms of the value add, to the more high volume production home where you kind of got to get in and out of there relatively quickly. Your margin per home might be lower, but the volume and your service capability offsets all that so you can compete. The reality is traditional integrators outside of the hybrid world do best in the luxury segment, and traditional mid-market providers really, and typically today, couldn't deliver the proper value to the luxury segment. So the market kind of has a nice equilibrium, in my opinion, that allows everybody to play in the segment of the market they feel they do best.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And when you look at this evolving market of builders getting into the smart home, it's natural to think, well, does this present a threat or an opportunity to home technology professionals? And I think your answer sums it up nicely in the sense that it really depends on where you sit in the market and what you're targeting, right?
Well, I thought about that idea, and I believe it's actually an opportunity for the integrators. And here's what I tell, integrators and many that I have very good friendships with. I believe companies like Lutron, our company, is focusing on basically increasing awareness and adoption of technology in entry-level homes or first move-up homes. My confidence is high that the folks that buy those homes in 5, 7, 10 years, when there's a family now, there's another child, there's a promotion, that family is moving up the economic ladder, the next home they buy, they will expect to have home automation and control technology. And in fact, they'll understand the value proposition. So in a way, it enables the high-end integrators' ability to provide innovation and technology solutions, because that homeowner already experienced it in their first home. It's a very different reality than it was 10 years ago, obviously.
Right. And speaking of that, I want to touch on this from that angle, because we've talked a lot about what this means to home technology professionals. But at the end of the day, what really matters is the average buyer of one of these homes, who presumably is going to be a first-time home buyer on a relatively limited budget for somebody buying a home. And it really comes down, I think, to, are these buyers going to perceive, appreciable value in these offerings? And if so, how much? And how much of that really comes down to something you alluded to, which is, are the builders going to be equipped to really sell the value of these solutions?
Right. Well, I think that, in fact, an increasing number of home buyers are getting enough exposure through technology advertising on television, on the radio, on their PC, on their smartphone, to recognize that, app-based control, integration of environmental systems, products that are easily installed. And today it's less about the debate over whether, Z-Wave or Zigbee or Wi-Fi or ClearConnect is the better or worst option. I think what's settling down is every manufacturer of home control and automation technology is picking the best communication protocols for their particular products. In our case, we believe ClearConnect is the most reliable two-way RF control that we invented back in 1997 for our products, and the need for super high reliability, and works every time. It works really well. But as part of that home, environment, which may ultimately be driven by HomeKit, there's many different systems around that environment that operate on other protocols. And the message is, as long as it's the manufacturer's solution, delivers reliable operation, intuitive operation, affordable, adoption, then, these players across all these different ecosystems in the home can, I think, do very well and really help to enhance the living experience for the home buyer. So I think, yes, They're wanting it more. And secondly, when they get base levels of standards of some of these things, right, because it's not typically the whole house yet, there's some base level of lighting and shade control. There's some base level of distributed audio. There's some base level of security. The statistics are saying that, the vast majority of them expand their systems very quickly and do what I like to call day two, upgrading from what they have.
Right. Do you see this? Do you see this as like a trend, or is this something that builders are going to be in for the long haul? Like, this may be how homes are sold as a standard. Like you made the analogy a minute ago about cars. Like, cars now ship with that rear view camera thing. Like, they're all bragging that it's a sales feature, but no, it's required because people need that in the car just to back up these days. Do you see that technology is just going to be expected into the home, or is this just kind of a trend that's going to wane out?
Yeah. So, I'm saying that my personal opinion, not just because I'm a sales leader at Lutron and I have to drive positive thinking for adoption of what I promote. No, I really believe it's here to stay. It's adoption is and commitment level of builders is growing every day. And even though today it's not viral, and I don't know when it'll go viral, it may never go viral, but it may grow at very positive rates that'll be good for, the manufacturers, the dealers, the builders, and the homeowners. But no question, more and more expectations of some technology, more and more confidence that reliable brands with reliable levels of quality and service are accepted to go into the home. And I use again, back to the cars. I mean, it's not just rear cameras, it's lane departure, it's streaming audio, it's your
power
phone.
Windows.
Exactly. I mean, obviously that's really old now, but no, I think it's here to stay. And whether I'm meeting with a luxury builder, a high-end builder, or a production builder, absolutely unequivocally, builders are preparing and planning on adoption of technology.
Great. Love to hear that. And I know Seth is half kidding when he says power windows, but I think it's a good analogy when you really stop and think about it, because that is something that you wouldn't ever see or think about buying a car without that now, for all intents and purposes. And maybe home technology is getting to that point with builders, or at least on the road to getting there. And so I think it's a fascinating market to watch. It's definitely one that I'm paying a lot of attention to. I think you're right on point in terms of a lot of people, our company, I would include in that, being so busy with the luxury market right now that it's hard to even think about a new market strategy. But I think it is something that every home technology professional should be keeping in the back of their mind. But let's move on. We got some more stuff we want to cover here with you beyond just the builder market. We really want to just get a quick update on Lutron. I know you guys have been very busy since the last year that we had you on. And one of the things that I know you've been working on, and a lot of other companies have as well, is Amazon Echo integration. So that's a big deal right now. Voice control is a very hot topic. And give us an overview of the current capabilities of Lutron as far as the Amazon Echo integration goes.
Sure. So yes, at CEDIA, we did announce the ability for Caseta, HomeWorks, Radio Raw 2 to easily integrate with Amazon Echo. The level of functionality kind of goes up from the Caseta level to when you get into HomeWorks and Raw 2. But let's first talk about the Caseta level first. Caseta will operate innately with Amazon Echo, and you have the ability to set out voice commands to turn on lights, turn on raise and lower shades, things like that. And very, very innately and very simply. And when you get into the Raw 2 and HomeWorks level of Alexa, you actually have the ability to create scenes. So, not only can you control the lights, the shades, without touching any device, you can activate scenes that can include lighting, shadings, temperature, and even audio. Obviously, we'll talk about the next announcement with Sonos, but the bottom line is, it's kind of like, where do we see technology going? Is it a fad, or is it here to stay? The more I listen and read and understand what futurists are saying, we've come a long way from the clapper. I think Amazon is an incredibly interesting innovation that goes into homes. I mean, beyond controlling our loads, just, I have some folks I work with have young children. They're using Amazon Echo to help them spell words on their homework, or get some data on history, or my boss, Michael Smith, uses Amazon Echo to build his shopping list. So I think voice recognition and voice control in homes is here to stay. And I think obviously Amazon's doing an incredible job of taking the mass consumer market and offering a very affordable solution to voice control in the home.
Right. And we've talked about it a number of times on the show. And I think really where Amazon finally figured it out, or cracked the code, so to speak, was in the form factor, and that stationary kind of always on, plug it in on the counter, and it's just there and ready for you when you need it. And of course, now we're seeing other companies sort of mimic that, Google Home being obviously a big one that was recently announced. Do you have any general thoughts on Google Home? I don't know if you can tip your hand at all. Is this something that Lutron is looking at, or will it work with in the future?
Well, I can say that we're always looking at new innovations, and, I have nothing to say at this point about where we are going with that, but I think it's more data that suggests that these kind of interactive devices are here to stay, right? Google Home looks very, very interesting, and obviously things we're looking at in terms of what we do in the future.
Cool. Very cool. So another one of the announcements that came out either like right at CEDIA or right before CEDIA was the Sonos integration with Lutron. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. We're really excited about that because, if you look at the iterations of Lutron in terms of our sphere or our center of control that made a lot of sense. Well, first it was control of electric light, right? From a simple rotary dimmer, and then derivatives of that in slide and in color and in different fashion designs. And then, it was wireless control through remotes that eventually have evolved to become Pico. But we went from control of electric light to the control of daylight. And that was a logical extension. So managing electric light and daylight optimally in the home, from everything from comfort to convenience to security to UV protection, a lot of logic. And then we went to temperature control, with our seat temp devices and our Honeywell Lutron thermostats. And of course, we now work with other thermostat companies as well. So now I would call that environmental, electric light, daylight, temperature, very interrelated elements of home control and environmental control. The next logical extension, which we're very excited about, is the sound environment. So when it comes down to setting scenes, there's nothing better than pressing a button and having your lights go to where you want for that task or activity, your shades to go to where you want for that task or activity, and then your favorite music to come on based on whether you're waking up in the morning or you're going to bed at night. So the Sonos, the endorsement by Sonos of Lutron to be a provider, and the addition of the Lutron Audio Pico, and the fact that so many consumers are already aware of and adopting Sonos as a very affordable, simple distributed audio system that's also scalable. For us, it's just the synergy of the value proposition that now we can do light, shades, temperature, and sound. And once again, we can go from Caseta up to Radio Raw 2 and even up to HomeWorks. We're really excited about it, and we think the synergy across these different elements of home environment only serve to reinforce the value proposition of app-based control, simple integration, and just in general, the confidence of putting technology in the home to make your life more enjoyable and pleasant.
Very cool. Very cool. Let's talk a little bit about the Lutron Connect Bridge. This is a product that's bringing in the integrations with HomeKit and Sonos into the Raw 2 and QS line. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the Connect Bridge physically looks like a Caseta Smart Bridge. However, what's inside it is significantly more appropriate for HomeWorks and Radio Raw 2 integration needs. But the reality is, I like to call it, it's a turbocharger for HomeWorks QS and Radio Raw 2. So this simple plug into your router device basically delivers really cool geofencing, home glance on your mobile devices. We've now gone, because of the Connect Bridge, to free remote access and cloud capability. This is also the machine, if you will, or the new device on a HomeWorks and Raw 2 system that allow for a really simple and cool Alexa and Sonos integration. It adds Apple and Android widgets to your phone. The time clock elements of this thing, it's now internet time based on internet time servers, automatic updates, and of course, it works with Nest and Honeywell Wi-Fi thermostats, which is also new and exciting for HomeWorks and Radio Raw 2, which allows, again, more impactful and reliable home control. For our dealers, really, why is this great device should become standard on every project? And by the way, it has a $350 list price, so it's not very expensive, but it improves, the service and enables new controls for the homeowner. So it gives more control options, especially through, I think, a more intuitive and more rich app. And it also gives the homeowner a different kind of connection to the dealer as well as Lutron, because of this, how we can now, through the cloud, manage that home's connected environment.
Right.
So
right. Smart product. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was going to say, today this is the level of value, and there's some nice features. You will see over time the benefits of Connect Bridge in terms of what it does for a lighting control system and a shading system and an integrated system in the home. It will go up as we continue to launch new releases of our software to drive it.
Yeah. I think it's a critical thing. It sounds like a small deal, and at $350 when you're out there selling Radio Raw or QS, it is a small price point, but it's an important thing to think about, again, because it's, we're seeing all this evolution at the low end of the market and all these new less expensive products and very robust solutions come to market. And so to have a simple way to add that sort of cloud functionality to either legacy systems or even current Radio Raw 2 or QS systems that you might be out there specifying is really important. So I know the Connect Bridge, when it first came out, was definitely a product that Seth and I were talking about, and I think it's a smart product in a lot of ways, and definitely a great fit for anyone out there who's doing Lutron at the high end of the market. Speaking of the high end of the market, we're running up against our time here a little bit, and I want to go up a little bit more towards the luxury end and talk about one of the ways that traditional integrators who have been in this business for a while may be looking for new markets to kind of expand into and learn about for future opportunities. And I know that the emergence of selling fixtures and LED drivers is a next logical step for a lot of those companies. Just talk about that market in general and maybe some of the challenges and opportunities that you see there.
Sure. So let me, as we talk about this kind of the luxury part of the business, I want to make sure that I reinforce that even though we're investing a lot in the mid-market and getting the base level homeowner introduced with home control and automation innovations and lifestyle enhancement, we're super committed to the luxury segment. So our HomeWorks platform, really important to us, growing very nicely. Our shading business, really important, growing very nicely. And our fastest growing new category is what I like to call high performance LED fixtures. So, we are absolutely working with our dealers and the specification community to introduce what I like to call a system match solution. So we got into the high performance LED fixture business, frankly, because there was a need to minimize risk and deliver a reliable system in terms of color consistency, in terms of smooth continuous dimming, also the benefits addressability, which we'll talk about in a minute. But at the end of the day, because of so much infusion of new LED lighting fixtures, drivers, different control protocols, and the dimming capabilities of today, very often there'd be a lot of finger pointing on projects when lighting control systems went in, fixtures went in, things were interconnected, and the performance was not meeting the homeowner's needs. In some cases, it means ripping out fixtures. In other cases, it means letting a customer down and becoming very expensive. So for us, the Fineri, which is a 3 and 4 inch downlight system, square and round, trim and trimless kind of trims with what we call a Zaccato light engine, delivers 98 CRI, which is almost as good as daylight, dimming down to 1%, very consistent color across many fixtures. And then if you specify it with our ecosystem driver, which is really something that evolved out of our commercial business, you now, through your HomeWorks software, can individually address lighting fixtures and rezone them and reorganize them based on how the homeowner changes their furniture layout, whatever. But this system is polarity free, topology free, line or low voltage wiring in terms of the communication. So what I think we've been able to do is help our dealers deliver a reliable solution. And in fact, Fineri is a really robust product. We just announced at CEDIA that our LED fixtures have now a 10-year warranty. Both our downlights and our Lumeris fixtures, which are our linear products, which, by the way, with a Lutron, a new driver can dim that down to 0.1%, which is really an architectural range for an under cabinet light. But my message is many electricians actually are excited that Lutron delivers this turnkey solution that ultimately the integrator has to be responsible for. Obviously, trades have to work cooperatively so that, the electrician has to be properly paid for wiring them and maybe installing them. The integrator has to take responsibility for the integration, perhaps providing them. But we are seeing in more and more cases that there's a very rational strategy for an integrator to sell lighting control, shading control, aesthetic keypads, integration, and basically the idea of digital lighting. That because these LED fixtures aren't just on-off incandescent simple products. They're very technical LED digital fixtures, and ultimately the relationship between that technology and the system is now very logical. And yeah, it is a great new revenue stream for our integrators.
Wow, very cool. I'm glad to see that product. I remember seeing that over in the commercial side, and I'm glad to see it has made its way into residential, because it definitely would fit in the super luxury market. I think that's really cool. David, I want to say thank you very much for taking your time to come on the show. If people want to reach out and get in touch with you and talk a little bit about Lutron, what's the best way they can do that?
Yeah, I think the best way is just shoot me an email, dweinstein@lutron.com. Or just call up Lutron and ask for me, and I'll get right back to you.
Very good, David. Well, I just want to echo what Seth said, and thank you once again for taking the time to come on and join us. Really enjoyed the conversation, and we'll look forward to reconnecting with you again soon.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. I really appreciate it.
All right, take care.